Welcome to one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Mississippi. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening to this narration. In the spring of 1829, on Willow Creek Plantation near Natchez, a discovery shattered the social hierarchies of antebellum society. Young enslaved laborer Solomon returned to his cabin after hours in the fields to find Mrs. Elizabeth Montgomery, wife of his master, Colonel James Montgomery, sitting alone in the darkness. The plantation ledgers, meticulously preserved in the Mississippi Historical Society archives, record Solomon's reaction as one of unseemly surprise and forbidden recognition, suggesting a prior acquaintance beyond the strict boundaries permitted between enslaved people and plantation mistresses. His quarters, a crude structure measuring 12 feet square with dirt floors and rough-hewn furniture crafted by Solomon's own skilled hands, had become the unlikely stage for an encounter that would eventually consume both their lives. Elizabeth, dressed in a fine indigo dress wholly unsuited to the squalid surroundings, reportedly clutched a small leather-bound volume to her chest, a detail documented decades later in the testimony of Patience, a house servant who had observed the mistress's peculiar movements over preceding months. Plantation medical records, discovered in 1945 during the renovation of the county courthouse, indicate Elizabeth had been making increasingly frequent visits to the slave quarters throughout that winter and early spring, ostensibly to deliver willow bark tinctures and other remedies during a seasonal fever outbreak. However, Solomon's cabin, positioned at the furthest edge of the quarters, had no recorded cases of illness. A sworn affidavit provided in 1923 by Martha Jenkins, aged 103 and formerly enslaved at Willow Creek, revealed that Elizabeth had been observed on no fewer than 7 occasions, slipping away at dusk toward the quarters, her distinctive blue shawl visible against the darkening sky as she moved swiftly along the narrow dirt path that connected the grand house to the workers' cabins. The plantation overseer's log noted with increasing frequency unusual movements by the mistress requiring further investigation, culminating with the entry on April 17th. Mistress absent from evening meal, located in inappropriate circumstances, Colonel to be informed immediately upon return. Archaeological surveys conducted in 1988 by the University of Mississippi revealed the true magnitude of Willow Creek Plantation, unearthing foundations spanning nearly 18 acres, with the grand house positioned atop a gentle rise overlooking the Mississippi River's fertile floodplain. The main structure's footprint measured an impressive 62 feet across its columned facade, with extensions for separate kitchen quarters and specialized workrooms, a testament to the considerable wealth Colonel James Montgomery had accumulated through cotton production and, as county tax records indicate, the ownership of 73 enslaved individuals, valued at $34,500 in 1828 currency. Military records from the War of 1812, preserved in the National Archives, document Montgomery's service under General Andrew Jackson, where he developed a reputation for unflinching discipline and tactical brutality that would later manifest in his plantation management style. The Adams County punishment logs, discovered in a courthouse basement in 1972, record no fewer than 17 official complaints regarding Montgomery's excessive discipline methods between 1820 and 1830. Though all were dismissed by local authorities who maintained close economic and social ties with the influential planter. A collection of letters, discovered in 1943 behind a loose baseboard in what was once the women's parlor, revealed Elizabeth Beaumont Montgomery's private correspondence with her sister in Charleston, detailing her profound unhappiness following her marriage at age 17 to the then 40-year-old colonel. "Father's debts have purchased me a mansion but imprisoned my heart," she wrote in the autumn of 1828, describing days filled with isolation and nights characterized by her husband's cold military precision in all matters, including those most intimate. The same letter collection provides glimpses of Solomon through Elizabeth's increasingly frequent mentions of the carpenter whose hands create beauty amid such ugliness. Solomon's origins emerge through purchase records filed with the county registrar in February 1827, noting his acquisition from the Fairview plantation in Virginia for the considerable sum of $900, approximately triple the standard price for field laborers of the period. The sale document specifically mentions his exceptional skill with furnishings of the finest quality and, unusually, his literacy, which his previous owner had permitted as necessary for reading furniture design specifications. This rare education would prove consequential in the relationship that began to form between the enslaved craftsman and the lonely plantation mistress during the winter of 1828 to 1829, as evidenced by the marginalia found in Elizabeth's personal Bible, containing what appears to be two distinct handwritings engaged in theological discussion through carefully penciled notes. The earliest documented pretext for Elizabeth Montgomery's visits to Solomon's cabin appears in a household accounts ledger from January 1829, where she recorded a commission for a lady's writing desk of particular specification, a project requiring multiple consultations over the following weeks. The furniture piece itself, remarkably preserved and currently housed in the Mississippi State Museum, bears subtle evidence of its role in their developing relationship. A hidden compartment discovered during conservation work in 1971 contained fragments of what museum curators identified as pages from William Lloyd Garrison's abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator, a publication strictly forbidden in southern states. A partial journal, recovered in 1952 from beneath the floorboards of an outbuilding during the property's development into a historical site, contains entries in what handwriting experts have identified as Solomon's educated script, noting, "She learns quickly what was kept from her anger growing with each revelation about the true conditions of our bondage." Their intellectual exchanges gradually transformed into something more profound, as evidenced by the remarkable discovery made by archaeologists in 1967 when excavating the cabin site, a woman's silk dress buried in a waterproof oilskin packet beneath the hearthstones. Microscopic examination revealed intricate embroidery work along the inner lining, which textile historians deciphered as a form of coded communication. Phrases including "midnight brings freedom" and "two hearts beyond station" were worked into the seams using techniques that rendered them invisible from the exterior. The same archaeological expedition unearthed a cache of items carefully wrapped and concealed in a hollowed space beneath the cabin's northeast corner. A silver thimble monogrammed with Elizabeth's initials, a hand-carved wooden bird of exceptional craftsmanship bearing Solomon's distinctive style, a lock of dark hair tied with blue thread, and most damning, a hand-drawn map of the route to the Ohio River with notations about safe houses along the way. A botanical analysis conducted in 1988 identified pollen particles trapped within the dress fabric, suggesting it had been worn extensively in the plantation gardens during the early spring blooming season, precisely when Elizabeth had reported to her husband that she was confined indoors with feminine complaints. As noted in the Colonel's business correspondence with his cotton factors in New Orleans, the discoveries point to a relationship that had progressed beyond intellectual companionship to intimate emotional involvement, with apparent plans for a future that would have been considered not merely scandalous but criminally punishable under Mississippi law. Whispered accounts from the enslaved community at Willow Creek began circulating by late February 1829. Their testimonies later compiled in the Federal Writers Project Slave Narratives of the 1930 Seconds, with one account stating that folks knew something dangerous was happening when Mrs. started finding reasons to walk past the woodshop 3 times a day. The plantation's disciplinary log, maintained by Overseer Thomas Wilkins and preserved in the Natchez Historical Society collection, shows a marked increase in Solomon's supervision beginning the 12th of March 1829, with entries noting, "Subject to remain in clear sight during daylight hours and cabin to be checked nightly at unexpected intervals, surveillance measures implemented without specific infractions being recorded." The most damning evidence of mounting suspicion appears in Wilkins' private correspondence to a fellow overseer on a neighboring plantation, discovered in 2005, where he confides, "I have reason to believe the Colonel's property is being misused in his absence, though I hesitate to make accusations that would result in bloodshed without absolute certainty." By early April, Elizabeth's condition had become the subject of careful observation, as Colonel Montgomery had been away on business in New Orleans since late January. His extended absence documented through hotel receipts and business correspondence that place him 4 days' journey from Willow Creek during the critical period of conception. The medical daybook of Dr. Jeremiah Whitfield, uncovered during the digitization of county archives in 1997, contains a carefully worded entry dated the 22nd of April 1829, attended Mrs. M. of W.C. Plantation regarding a delicate female condition of approximately 8 weeks' duration. Patient inquired about discreet remedies to address the situation before her husband's return next month. Advised against such measures due to considerable risk to her person. Patient distressed upon departure. A subsequent entry dated 3 days later records payment received not in the customary bank draft but in the form of a Montgomery family heirloom brooch, suggesting an attempt to keep the consultation from appearing in household accounts that might be reviewed by the Colonel upon his return. The gravity of Elizabeth's situation is further emphasized in a hurried note delivered to Dr. Whitfield on April 29, discovered among his personal effects after his death, reading simply, "He knows. God help us all." The handwriting confirmed by experts to match Elizabeth Montgomery's samples from other documents. Colonel James Montgomery's carriage arrived at Willow Creek on the evening of the 2nd of May, 1829, nearly 3 weeks ahead of his expected return, a deviation from schedule documented in a hastily amended business itinerary discovered among his personal papers in 1976. His early arrival coincided with the receipt of correspondence from Harold Thornton, owner of the neighboring Magnolia Hill plantation, fragments of which were recovered during the restoration of Montgomery's desk in 1962, containing the ominous warning, "It pains me as a gentleman to relay such matters, but whispers have reached even my household regarding Mrs. Montgomery's unusual attentions to one of your skilled people. Such rumors, whether founded or imaginary, risk your family's standing should they spread beyond our immediate circle." The plantation's financial ledgers reveal Montgomery's immediate response. Expenditures for 3 additional armed overseers hired on May 3rd at premium wages, alongside purchases of iron locks, window bars, and ammunition from Natchez merchants. The Household Management Journal, maintained by the head housekeeper and preserved in the University of Mississippi archives, records new directives issued on May 4th. Mistress to remain within the main house unless accompanied by trusted staff. Garden privileges revoked. No visitors to be admitted without master's express approval. Doctor's appointments canceled indefinitely. The Colonel's cold fury manifested most severely in the plantation work assignments for May, which show Solomon's abrupt transfer from the carpentry workshop to the distant northern cotton fields, the most physically demanding and dangerous area of the plantation due to its proximity to snake-infested swampland. The cryptic notation beside this reassignment reads only, "Moral correction required," though no formal accusation appears in the disciplinary records. A fragment of Elizabeth's desperate message to Solomon, intercepted by an overseer and preserved as evidence in the Colonel's private safe, suggests the punishment was implemented without direct confrontation. He suspects but does not know the full truth. "I am watched constantly. Destroy anything that might reveal our..." The remainder of the message was torn away, but its existence confirms the Colonel's strategy of gathering evidence while strategically separating the suspected lovers. The Montgomery household dinner records show Elizabeth was required to appear nightly at her husband's table, though multiple entries note she took no sustenance and appeared physically diminished, suggesting the psychological warfare that preceded the inevitable confrontation. The inevitable confrontation erupted on the night of the 15th of May, 1829, as documented in the sworn testimony of house servant Jeremiah, recorded 67 years later when he was interviewed at age 92 for the Freedmen's Bureau records. The whole house shook with the colonel's rage, he recounted, describing how glass shattered and furniture splintered against walls as Montgomery's voice thundered through the mansion's halls with accusations that made even the most hardened household servants tremble. Sarah Williams, Elizabeth's lady's maid, provided the most chilling account during an interview conducted in 1889 when she was discovered living in Cincinnati under a different name. "I was forbidden to enter mistress's chamber for 3 days following, but when finally permitted, I discovered the bedsheets soaked through with blood that had dried to rust brown, and mistress herself barely conscious, her face unrecognizable from the beating." The plantation's business ledger, with its meticulous accounting, reveals the clinical aftermath of violence through entries dated May 16th. Disciplinary action required, medical attention for Mrs. M., followed by expenses for laudanum, bandages, and payment to Dr. Whitfield for discreet services rendered. The same page records purchases more ominous in nature: iron manacles, chains, and payment for 4 additional armed guards described as experienced in fugitive prevention. A fragmentary note in Elizabeth's handwriting, discovered concealed in the binding of her Bible during museum conservation in 1992, suggests the confrontation escalated when she revealed her condition. "When I spoke the truth of the child, his eyes changed to those of a stranger capable of unimaginable cruelty. He swore no Montgomery blood runs in this innocent's veins, and so no Montgomery name or inheritance shall follow." The Colonial Revival desk in Montgomery's study, when X-rayed during restoration in 2001, revealed a hidden compartment containing a tress of Elizabeth's auburn hair alongside a folded document, a draft petition for commitment to the Mississippi State Asylum on grounds of moral insanity and nymphomania with attendant delusions regarding persons of inferior station. The document remained unsigned, suggesting Montgomery had conceived a different punishment for his wife's transgression. The plantation work ledger for the 27th of May, 1829, contains a hastily scrawled notation beside Solomon's identification number. "Absent without authorization, sound the horn." The subsequent hours erupted into frenzied activity documented in expense vouchers submitted to Montgomery's accountant. Compensation for 23 men forming a hunting party, provision of whiskey and ammunition, and payment for 5 trained tracking dogs borrowed from neighboring plantations. The meticulous household inventory conducted annually by Elizabeth as mistress of Willow Creek, recovered from county archives in 1957, reveals, through comparison with the previous year's document, that only minimal items disappeared with her: a single dress, a woolen shawl, her mother's locket, and, curiously, her Bible and personal writing case. The Natchez Courier's May 30th edition, preserved on microfilm at the State Library, carried a prominently placed notice: $500 reward for return of Mrs. Elizabeth Montgomery, abducted against her will by runaway slave Solomon, approximately 30 years of age, educated speech, carpenter by trade, Mrs. Montgomery in delicate condition requiring immediate medical attention. Armed and to be considered dangerous. This public narrative of abduction stands in stark contradiction to a letter discovered in 1978 among the personal effects of Elizabeth's sister in Charleston, dated May 23rd, 4 days before the disappearance, in which Elizabeth writes, "By the time this reaches you, I will have taken the irrevocable step toward freedom. Judge me not by society's laws, but by the courage to follow one's heart regardless of consequence." Colonel Montgomery's true motivations emerge through correspondence with the Adams County Sheriff and private slave catchers, 5 such letters preserved in the State Historical Archives, revealing his increasingly vengeful instructions. "I care not what condition the male fugitive is returned in, so long as he draws breath sufficient to witness the consequences of his transgression, and more chillingly, regarding Elizabeth, secure her by whatever means necessary, but with care for the child she carries, as I have determined its fate upon delivery." Maps recovered from Montgomery's study indicate he correctly anticipated their northward trajectory toward the Ohio River. with notations calculating daily travel distances possible in Elizabeth's condition and identifying the likely assistance points established by abolitionists, evidence that the colonel's military background provided him advantages in predicting the desperate couple's movements through the wilderness. The Adams County Sheriff's records, recovered during courthouse renovations in 1934, document the capture of Solomon on the 4th of June 1829 in the cypress swamps near the Mississippi-Tennessee border, the terse entry noting fugitive apprehended after sustaining gunshot wound to right leg during resistance. A supplementary report details the apply-to-seiche. Discovery of Elizabeth Montgomery, in advanced state of privation and distress, in a crude shelter approximately 50 yards from the capture site. Her condition described as fevered and experiencing complications related to her delicate state. The medical log from Dr. Jeremiah Whitfield records his summons to Willow Creek on June 7 for treatment of female patient suffering exposure, malnutrition, and threatened miscarriage, though conspicuously absent are the customary follow-up notations regarding patient recovery. Transportation vouchers indicate Elizabeth and Solomon returned to the plantation via separate conveyances, with Elizabeth transported in the physician's personal carriage, while Solomon was secured in a reinforced wagon typically used for livestock. The most disturbing evidence regarding their fates emerged in 1897, when the Mississippi Medical College received an unusual anatomical specimen, human skin preserved in a solution of alcohol and formaldehyde, bearing distinctive pattern marks. The accompanying documentation identified the specimen as originating from an enslaved person subjected to specialized punishment at Willow Creek Plantation circa 1830, with the examining physician noting, "The systematic application of heated metal implements appears designed to inflict maximum pain while maintaining consciousness, consistent with torture methods rather than conventional discipline. Elizabeth's existence underwent a systematic erasure, as evidenced by the household staff ledgers showing the reassignment of her lady's maid to kitchen duties and the hiring of special attendant for secured chamber in East Attic, an unnamed woman paid double the part. Standard wage, presumably for discretion." Parish church records show Colonel Montgomery attending services alone from June 1829 onward, with a notation in the pastor's journal expressing concern about Mrs. Montgomery's extended absence due to unspecified illness, and the colonel's terse response that she remains indisposed for the foreseeable future. The plantation's architectural drawings, modified in July 1829, reveal alterations to an attic room, including reinforced door hinges, the installation of interior bolt mechanisms operable only from the outside, and the replacement of glass windows with narrowly spaced iron bars, converting what had been a storage space into what can only be described as a prison cell. St. Mary's Parish Birth Register, accessed by researchers in 1963, contains a cryptic entry dated the 30th of September 1829, male child born to E.M. of W.C., with no corresponding baptism record, a highly unusual omission for a child of prominent plantation owners. The testimony of Harriet Jenkins, a kitchen servant who brought food to the attic room during Elizabeth's confinement, was recorded by a Freedmen's Bureau agent in 1867. "I heard the baby cry for 2 nights only, then silence. When I asked about the child, the guard threatened to have me whipped if I ever spoke of it again." The plantation's financial ledger reveals an illuminating transaction dated the 3rd of October 1829. A substantial payment of $500 to James and Martha Caruthers of Tishomingo County, over 200 miles northeast of Willow Creek, described obliquely as compensation for permanent arrangement of creek. Domestic matter. County census records from 1830 show the previously childless Caruthers family, suddenly including a male infant under 1 year of age, identified as William Caruthers, with no birth record filed in their local parish. Elizabeth Montgomery's existence undergoes a chilling erasure in the weeks following the birth. Her name disappears entirely from household accounts, social registers, and church prayer lists. though no death certificate was ever filed with county authorities. The personal diary of Dr. Whitfield, discovered behind a false wall during the demolition of his office in 1912, contains a disturbing entry from October 1829, called to W.C. regarding female patient. Found condition beyond medical intervention. Spiritual counsel perhaps more appropriate than my services. Local speculation about Elizabeth's fate circulated widely, documented by French journalist Claude Beaumont, who traveled through Natchez in 1831, noting in his published travelogue, "The region whispers of a plantation mistress who vanished after forbidden love with an enslaved man. Some claim she ended her life with laudanum, others that she resides in an asylum under another name, while the most troubling accounts suggest she remains imprisoned within her own home, a living ghost behind walls of privilege and power." Colonel Montgomery's correspondence with his attorney in November 1829 perhaps provides the most telling clue, requesting information about legal requirements for remarriage in the absence of documented death, when abandonment can be reasonably claimed. Adams County emergency records, discovered during the digitization of municipal archives in 1983, document a catastrophic fire at Willow Creek Plantation on the night of the 17th of December 1829, which originated in the dwelling of skilled laborer Solomon before rapidly consuming 8 adjacent structures in the slave quarters. The official report, compiled by the county fire inspector, notes with clinical detachment that 4 souls perished in the conflagration, with an additional 3 suffering burns of varying severity. Though conspicuously absent are the identities of the deceased, an unusual omission in otherwise meticulous county records. Colonel Montgomery's subsequent insurance claim, filed with the Mississippi Property Assurance Company on December 23 and preserved in their corporate archives, calculates losses amounting to $1,200 for structural damage to agricultural worker housing and loss of property therein, the careful wording avoiding any acknowledgement of human casualties, despite the significant death toll. The most damning evidence regarding the fire's origins emerged in 1901, when folklore collector Margaret Wilkins interviewed Samuel Johnson, a former Willow Creek groundskeeper then in his 90s, who provided a chilling account. "It weren't no accident, that fire." The colonel himself instructed Overseer Wilkins to ensure Solomon's cabin burned to ash, saying, "Let nothing remain that might speak after death." They waited until midnight, doused the walls with whale oil, and sealed the door from outside. Archaeological excavations conducted in 1992 provide corroborating physical evidence, uncovering cabin foundations bearing chemical residue consistent with deliberately applied accelerants, along with door hinges showing signs of external tampering. The plantation's disciplinary records show Solomon had been returned to his cabin that evening after weeks of confinement in the plantation's punishment structure, a suspicious transfer given Montgomery's documented rage toward him. The nearby mass grave, discovered by ground-penetrating radar in 2008, contains commingled remains of multiple individuals, with forensic analysis revealing traumatic injuries inconsistent with fire deaths, suggesting some victims may have been killed before the flames were set. Most telling is a letter from Montgomery to his attorney, dated the 20th of December, 1829, expressing satisfaction that the unfortunate matter has been concluded with finality, all evidence having been permanently eliminated from worldly concern. Colonel Montgomery's marriage to Caroline Beaufort, the 20-year-old daughter of a neighboring plantation owner, was announced in the Natchez Courier on August 12, 1830, barely 8 months after the fire that had allegedly claimed Solomon's life. The social pages praised the union as a promising new chapter for one of Mississippi's most distinguished families, with no mention of Elizabeth or the circumstances of her absence from society. Caroline's private diary, discovered in the Tulane University archives during a 1974 cataloging project, reveals the young bride's growing unease in her new home, particularly regarding strange occurrences in the mansion's east wing, where Elizabeth had been confined. For the third night, I have been awakened by what sounds like a woman's wailing coming from behind the locked doors in the east attic. She wrote in November 1830, continuing, "When I inquired of Martha about these disturbances, the woman's face drained of color before she insisted I must have dreamed the sounds, though her trembling hands suggested otherwise." The diary further records Caroline's futile attempts to learn about her predecessor, noting, "The servants fall silent at any mention of the previous Mrs. Montgomery, exchanging glances that communicate volumes of unspoken knowledge. My husband forbids all discussion of her, claiming it aggravates a nervous condition." Solomon's existence undergoes an equally mysterious erasure. His name simply vanishes from plantation records after the fire, with no death certificate filed despite his reported demise. The property inventory conducted in January 1830 conspicuously omits him from the list of casualties, instead categorizing his status as removed from accounts. The archaeological excavation of Solomon's cabin site in 1995 yielded compelling evidence challenging the official narrative. Beneath the burned floorboards, investigators discovered a small metal box containing partially charred love letters written in two distinct handwritings, alongside a meticulously carved wooden pendant bearing Elizabeth's initials on one side and an intricate design resembling intertwined hands on the reverse. Most revealing was a document fragment preserved between slate sheets, containing Elizabeth's final message: "Should Providence deliver this testimony, let history know that love transcended the boundaries they built between us." When Union forces occupied Adams County in 1863, Lieutenant Jacob Whitman of the 5th Ohio Volunteer Infantry was assigned to requisition Willow Creek Plantation for military purposes. His personal journal, now preserved in the Library of Congress Civil War collection, noting the peculiar reluctance of local freedmen to assist with the operation. These newly liberated people, eager for paid work elsewhere, universally refuse employment at Willow Creek. He wrote on the 17th of June, 1863, claiming the land itself is cursed ground where the innocent still cry out. When pressed, an elderly man recounted a disturbing tale of a forbidden love between the master's wife and an enslaved craftsman that ended in fire and blood some 30 years ago. Colonel Montgomery, by then in his 70s but still formidable, met the Northern occupation with armed resistance, dying in a brief skirmish on his front portico, an inglorious end documented in military dispatches as neutralization of armed Confederate sympathizer. Among Montgomery's personal effects, confiscated by Union officers and later cataloged by the War Department, was a leather portfolio containing correspondence with his attorney, showing increasingly erratic concerns. "I remain convinced that sounds from the East Wing cannot be attributed to natural causes," reads one letter dated 1859, while another from 1860 questions. "Can guilt manifest physically in a dwelling, or has her spirit truly remained to torment me as punishment for necessary actions taken?" Following the war, Willow Creek entered a period of revolving ownership documented in county property records, with no purchaser maintaining residence longer than 5 years between 1866 and 1890. The diary of Rebecca Thornton, who with her husband acquired the plantation in 1873, provides insight into these abbreviated tenancies. "The local workers speak of ghosts, which I dismissed as superstition until experiencing the phenomena myself. Objects displaced without explanation, the persistent sound of weeping from the sealed East Wing, and most disturbing, the recurring dream of a pregnant woman standing by my bedside, her face bruised beyond recognition, whispering, 'He took everything.'" The property's reputation became so notorious that by 1885, the real estate listing acknowledged the challenges directly, advertising Willow Creek at 1/3 market value for purchasers of practical disposition, untroubled by local legends or unexplained occurrences in the historic residence. The 1967 archaeological excavation of Willow Creek Plantation, led by Dr. Margaret Holloway of the University of Mississippi, uncovered the most compelling physical evidence of the relationship between Elizabeth Montgomery and Solomon. when ground-penetrating radar detected an anomaly beneath the burned cabin's foundation. Excavation revealed a concealed root cellar, its entrance carefully disguised beneath the hearthstones, a space containing preserved items that had survived the fire due to their underground protection. The archaeological team documented a remarkable collection, a woman's traveling case containing clothing for different seasons, suggesting plans for extended journey rather than temporary flight. Financial documents including bank drafts totaling $1,200 withdrawn from Elizabeth's personal inheritance, detailed maps of routes to Canada with safe houses marked along the Ohio River, and most poignantly, a daguerreotype in a silver frame showing Elizabeth alone, its backing containing a hidden compartment with a small coil of dark hair tied with blue silk thread. The excavation report, initially classified as sensitive historical material until 1989, also documents the recovery of forged freedom papers for Solomon using the surname Freeman, alongside baptismal documentation prepared for a child of Elizabeth and Solomon Freeman, indicating the couple had planned not merely escape, but the establishment of a new identity as a family in free territory. The most definitive evidence emerged in 2008 when the Smithsonian Institution conducted DNA analysis on organic materials preserved from the site, specifically hair samples from the daguerreotype's hidden compartment and fibers from a child's blanket found in the cellar. These genetic materials were compared with DNA voluntarily provided by Margaret Carruthers Johnson, a descendant of William Carruthers, the child who appeared suddenly in the Tishomingo County census of 1,830. The analysis confirmed with 99.7% certainty that Elizabeth Montgomery and Solomon were the biological parents of William Carruthers, proving that Colonel Montgomery had indeed separated the infant from his mother and arranged its placement with a distant family under a new identity. The genetic evidence finally settled decades of historical speculation, with Dr. Eliza Thompson, lead geneticist on the project, noting, "Science has given voice to those deliberately silenced by history, confirming a lineage that powerful forces attempted to erase from existence." In 2012, Dr. Michael Carruthers Johnson, great-great-great-grandson of William Carruthers and associate professor of American Studies at Howard University, discovered a cache of family documents while clearing his late grandmother's attic. Yellowed papers including a journal kept by Martha Carruthers detailing the mysterious arrival of an infant into her care in 1829 with instructions to never speak of his origins, alongside an unusually large payment that established the formerly struggling family's subsequent prosperity. Intrigued by this ancestral mystery and the genetic findings from 2008, Dr. Johnson initiated a comprehensive investigation into his family's connection to Willow Creek Plantation, accessing previously sealed records in the Mississippi State Archives. His research uncovered a shocking legal maneuver. Court documents dated January 1,830 inches, which Colonel Montgomery had successfully petitioned to have Elizabeth declared legally deceased, citing irrefutable evidence of her demise during childbirth, despite no body being produced and no death certificate filed with county authorities, a declaration that cleared the way for his remarriage and the complete erasure of her relationship with Solomon from official records. Property surveys conducted by Dr. Johnson, in partnership with the Mississippi Historical Society, revealed another disturbing anomaly. While every acre of the former plantation had been developed or repurposed in the intervening centuries, the precise quarter-acre where Solomon's cabin had stood remained conspicuously undeveloped across multiple owners, appearing in consecutive land surveys as fallow ground unsuitable for cultivation. Local oral histories, collected by Johnson from elderly residents whose ancestors had worked the land, consistently described the site as ground that refuses seed, with multiple accounts of failed attempts to build structures there, resulting in unexplained accidents or illness befalling the construction workers. Most compelling was Johnson's discovery of a petition filed in 1917 by then-owner Frederick Winters, requesting county permission to erect a memorial stone on the barren plot, the application stating, "Local lore suggests 2 souls perished here whose story remains untold. One in flames witnessed, one behind walls unrecorded, their remains never recovered nor properly consecrated, leaving an obligation unfulfilled that perhaps explains the land's resistance to renewal. The comprehensive historical narrative of Willow Creek, assembled by the Mississippi Historical Commission in 2020, represents the most complete accounting of events to date, yet fundamental mysteries remain unresolved despite advanced investigative techniques. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in 2018 identified 3 anomalous burial sites in unconsecrated ground, approximately 50 yards behind the former slave quarters. Hastily dug graves without coffins, markers dating to the appropriate historical period but impossible to identify definitively without exhumation, which descendants have opposed on grounds of dignity and respect. The most haunting discoveries emerged during restoration of furnishings originally crafted by Solomon for the Montgomery Mansion, now housed in various museum collections across the country. Conservators identified an elaborate system of hidden messages carved into the underside of drawer bottoms, chair rails, and bedposts. Nearly 30 distinct communications when catalogued chronologically, revealing not only the evolution of their relationship but an intricate escape plan with predetermined rendezvous points, emergency contingencies, and coded signals. Most disturbing was the final message, dated only weeks before their capture, reading, "Beware the doctor's wife who watches from windows. She has seen us twice now." This revelation of betrayal by Mrs. Whitfield, whose husband attended Elizabeth during her pregnancy, contextualizes a previously puzzling entry in Dr. Whitfield's financial ledger showing an unusual payment from Colonel Montgomery predating the discovery of the escape attempt. The ultimate fate of Elizabeth Montgomery remains the most profound enigma. No death certificate was ever filed, no burial recorded, yet she vanishes completely from all records after October 1829. The persistent legends of sounds from the sealed East Wing, reported consistently across generations of occupants until the mansion's demolition in 1924, suggest the most disturbing possibility that Elizabeth may have survived for years in isolated confinement, her existence erased from public record but her presence an unspoken secret within the household. As historian Dr. Rebecca Williams observed in her definitive 2022 study, the case of Elizabeth and Solomon represents the most intimate form of resistance to the antebellum system, a love that challenged fundamental social boundaries, and the brutal forces mobilized to erase not only their croupy bond, but their very existence from historical memory.